something is happening today that is really quite scandalous, and that is that the government has announced that it is calling for evidence in its review of the water sector. I find it quite astonishing that Steve Reed, the Environment Secretary, stood on doorsteps alongside other Labour MPs promising to fix the water industry, promising to stop raw sewage flowing in our rivers and seas. And then if we look at what he's done in power, he has simply kowtowed to the privatised water industry. He's met with privatised water and he seems to be defending their interests and not ours, even though less than a year ago he was standing on doorsteps saying that he would defend the public interest, saying that he would defend the environmental interest. So the problem with the government's review of the water sector, great, it sounds great, an independent commission on water, looking at what's gone wrong, the largest review of the water sector since privatisation back in 1989. So you would think, given that it is the largest review of the water sector since privatisation, since 78 billion flowed out from our bills into shareholder dividends around the world, since these privatised water companies built up these massive debt mountains at our expense, since they allowed raw sewage to flow in our rivers and seas, you would think that this review would look at ownership, would look at who owns our water, that it would look at privatisation and what has happened in this failed experiment that England decided to go down. But no. So the review, the government has explicitly ruled out nationalisation. They have said repeatedly that they have no intention to nationalise water, even though they're having a supposedly independent review. Why will they not consider nationalisation in this independent review of the water sector, the largest since privatisation? They say that nationalisation, public ownership, would cost too much. This is nonsense. When the government says this, they are referring to a 2018 paper by the Social Market Foundation. This paper was commissioned by the privatised water companies, by Anglian Water, Severn Trent Water, South West Water and United Utilities. So the Social Market Foundation, funded by these water companies, concluded that it would cost 90 billion to nationalise water. This is a complete fiction. So I'm going to take you through why it's a fiction. So Professor Dieter Helm from the University of Oxford gives 3 reasons for why it is economically illiterate to say that this would be the cost. The first reason is that the valuation of these water companies is based on the existing regulatory failure. In other words, the water sector has failed. Everyone acknowledges this. That's why the government is holding a review. It has failed because these privatised water companies have been allowed to get away with murder, sometimes literal murder of fish and wildlife. And they have been allowed to rack up debt at our expense, to allow dividends to flow to their shareholders. They have not been held to account. And they've made massive, massive profits. And Dieter Helm talks about these companies as being engaged in massive financial engineering. So are these companies valuable? Well, yes, they make a lot of money at our expense because the whole thing is a complete rip-off. And that is what this valuation is being based on. So why should we pay so much to get these companies back when the only reason they are valued highly is because of how much they are ripping us off? That's not a fair situation. And obviously what the government should be doing is bringing down the valuation of these companies by making this a less profitable business, by actually holding these companies to account. And in fact, why should they be profiting at all? But so it's based on a false valuation. The second point that Dieter Helm raises is about how in mergers and acquisition, it tends to be that there can be overpayment. And so he says there would not be a need for such overpayment. The third point that he makes is arguably the most important point. And that is that when you buy an asset that has a revenue stream, that has a value. And so why does the government only look at the cost of buying water companies and not look at the revenue that would be coming in when we own our water companies, when we have public ownership and the money is flowing back into investment into the infrastructure? That money is coming in. So if you buy something, it has value, it is an asset. Yes, you have paid for it, but you have acquired an asset, and that is basic. So alongside Dieter Helm's explanation of why the government is being economically illiterate about the cost of nationalising water, we have Moody's, the credit ratings agency, saying that it could cost as little as 14.5 billion to buy back the water companies. So that is a far lower sum than what the government is still claiming 7 years later. So really what's happening right now is that this government has got into power promising to fix the water sector, and now every time they get asked about public ownership, they are repeating a figure that is simply not true, that is funded by the water industry, that has been exposed as being economically illiterate, and that makes no sense. And they are hoping that we, the public, will not notice, that we will think, oh yes, well, it must be very expensive. No, we are being ripped off. We are being ripped off repeatedly. That is why these water companies are overvalued. And we don't have to be ripped off, because the government could change the regulatory environment by actually holding these water companies to account, and then they could buy them back. And in the case of Thames Water, they could take them back. Steve Reed could bring Thames Water into public ownership tomorrow, because this is a company that is financially insolvent, as well as a company that is failing in its statutory duties by polluting our rivers. What does the government think is the solution? Well, they want to talk about banning bosses' bonuses, and they want to talk about pressing criminal charges. And that all sounds like they're holding the water industry to account. But really what they're doing is they're coming into a situation where they have a once in a lifetime opportunity to look at the failure of water privatisation since 1989, to assess it, to look at why it's happened, and to change it. And they are not taking that opportunity, and that is a dereliction of their duty. It's a dereliction of their duty to us, the public, who pay for these water companies to exist and to profit at our expense, and who want our rivers and our seas to be clean, which is not too much to ask. So the government says that in its call for evidence, it wants to hear from you. And it has also said that it won't consider public ownership. And Sir John Cunliffe, who is the person who in charge of the commission, the supposedly independent commission of the water sector, he is a civil servant. He previously worked at the Bank of England in financial stability. He is saying in the media today that not everyone agrees on the solution when he talks to people about how to fix the water industry. Well, the truth is that actually most of us do agree, because 82% of us think water should be in public ownership. And that is a majority of Conservative voters, Labour voters, Lib Dem voters, Reform voters, and Green voters. And by the way, the Greens do actually commit to water in public ownership. And in fact, Reform is also wanting water in public ownership. So 8 out of 10 of us think water should be in public ownership. There isn't so much controversy about the simple idea that a natural monopoly should work for people and for the environment and not for profit. And we need to send a really simple message to Sir John Cunliffe and to Steve Reed and to the government. Water belongs in public ownership. We want you to consider this. 90% of the world runs water in public ownership. It's really normal. How dare you open up a supposedly independent commission on the water sector after 36 years of privatisation and not consider the question of ownership. How dare you? That is unacceptable. People voted for you. They voted hoping that you would stand up for the millions of households who don't get any choice about where they get their water from. They voted for you hoping that you would invest in the infrastructure, clean up rivers and seas. You need to put the option of public ownership on the table. You need to look at the issue of ownership, because actually, who owns this vital public service, this vital public asset, does matter. And most people believe that it does. If you agree with this, please sign up to our petition we have just launched today, saying that the government must consider the option of public ownership. The link is in the description below. Please sign up. We need to hold the government to account on this. We cannot let them get away with thinking that we just don't understand what's going on here. We cannot let them get away with saying, oh, public ownership is too expensive, never mind that it's what the rest of the world does. So if you want to not just like and comment, and that is wonderful, please do like and comment, but if you want to also do something about this, please sign the petition and we will be taking action on this issue. So we really need you to be involved. Thank you.